Welcome to your complete beginner's guide for the DJI FLIP. This video is going to go through everything that you need to know to get up and flying fast with this tiny, unique little drone. So in this video, we're going to go through everything about how to use the drone, everything about the drone itself, and we'll also go through some different techniques on how to get good footage when you're out flying. Now, before we dive into everything about this drone, let me just give you a quick outline of what you're going to learn in this video. So first, I'll give you some thoughts around this drone if you are in the market for one and you're thinking of buying one, and then we'll go into a drone overview. So we'll go over everything around the drone itself. Then we'll take it outside and I'll show you how to fly without a controller. So without pairing it to a phone or without pairing it to one of the controllers that you can use with this drone. Then we'll get into how you actually fly it manually using your phone and all of the different features that you have access to when you pair it with your phone and the DJI FLY app. And with that, we'll go into how you actually record audio using the drone so that you can do a walk and talk with the drone being your personal camera person. And then we'll dig into the controller, the RC2. This is going to open up a lot of flexibility to be able to control this drone and fly it in a much different way than if you were just pairing it with your phone. Then we'll dig into the DJI FLY app and I'll go through everything that you need to know on the screen when you're out flying. And then we'll go into a quick tutorial on how to actually fly the drone to start getting some interesting looking footage. From there, we'll dig into some tracking features when you're using the controller and so that you can get some interesting shots of yourself if you are out there as a solo creator. And then at the end, we'll dig into how you get some cinematic footage with this drone because the sensor is really good on this drone and you can get some really great shots, especially when you're shooting in D-Log-M. So if you're ready, let's get into it. And I just want to say a special thanks to DJI for sponsoring this video. All right, so let's just have a quick discussion about this drone and kind of where it fits in DJI's lineup, because there are a lot of drones that DJI has created, and this drone is very unique. It's the only drone that has this flip design where all the propellers kind of fold up in this way where they sit kind of flush against each other. It's a very unique style for a drone, and it does make it actually very easy to pack away in your backpack. So every time that I've been taking this drone out, I've been using either my hiking backpack that I use when I take camera gear, but I've also taken it out trail running and I've put it in my little trail running backpack and it fits just fine. The design allows it to be super easy to use, and when you're ready to start flying, you just flip out each of the propellers and the drone will turn on automatically. So if you are just using this drone without the controller, you just open it up, hit the button to take off, and then it will take off from the palm of your hand and start following you. So as a camera that's gonna personally follow you anywhere you go, it's actually a really good choice because the DJI Neo, it has the same functionality. However, the camera on the DJI FLIP is much better. This is the same sensor that you get on the DJI Mini 4 Pro. So the footage is gonna look really good out of this camera. It shoots up to 4K 60 frames per second, and in slow motion, you can go up to 4K 100 frames per second. It's a 1 and 1.3 inch sensor, and you could shoot in D-Log-M, which gives you more control over your footage. It shoots 10-bit 420 footage at 150 megabits per second so that when you shoot in D-Log-M, you're gonna be able to color grade your footage. Now, this drone has a 31-minute flight time. So it's a little bit less than the Mini 4 Pro, but it still gives you plenty of time when you're up in the air to be able to get some good looking shots. And a big thing with this drone is that it's under the 249 gram limit. So you can fly this in a lot more settings than you can with the heavier drones, depending on the country you're in and the restrictions that you would have to adhere to. Now for photos, you could shoot 12 megapixel or 48 megapixel photos, and you can shoot in JPEG or RAW. So this drone is basically like a combination of the DJI Neo and the DJI Mini 4 Pro kind of squished together, and it sits somewhere kind of between the two. Now, in terms of vision sensors, you have front-facing vision sensors. So it won't run into something flying forward, but it doesn't have any side-to-side or back vision sensors. So this is very much aimed at solo creators who want to be filming themselves, and then the drone can follow you wherever you're going, and it's not going to run into something when it is in that follow mode. Now, there is the ability to shoot with audio on this drone when you pair it with your phone, and the drone will actually fly backwards and you can do a walk and talk. However, there is no vision sensors behind it, so the drone could crash into something. However, because it's in front of you, you're gonna see where the drone is at all time, especially if you're doing a walk and talk and you're looking right at the drone. And in terms of controlling the drone, you can either control it without any controllers, so just taking off from the palm of your hand and using buttons on the drone itself to be able to control and give you some different quick shot modes. You could use your phone, manually control using your phone, or you could use one of the controllers like the RC2, take full control of the drone and be able to get some really good looking footage. Now, the one thing that this drone does not have, but the Neo has, is the ability to pair it with the FPV goggles and fly full FPV. This drone is only set up to fly with the phone off your hand and with the standard controller like the RC2. So overall, for a small compact drone that can get some good shots of yourself when you're out filming, I would personally choose this one over the DJI Neo just because the footage looks so much better. However, if you are someone who is interested in FPV flying, but you're just getting started, then the Neo is probably the drone that you're gonna wanna go for so you could fly it in all the different ways. And in terms of pricing, it sits between the Mini and the Neo. So it very much is that in-between drone that has some capabilities of the Mini 4 Pro, some capabilities of the Neo, but still has a really good camera. So if you want to see more information about the whole drone and all of the different specs, I'll put a link down below the description to where you can check that out. But we have a lot to cover because I'm going to show you everything that you need to know about this drone to get up and flying fast. So let's dive right in. So let's go over everything about the DJI FLIP. So out of the box, it's going to be all folded together and it has all of the covers on. So to open this drone, it's fairly simple. You just lift the front two propellers forward and the back two propellers backwards. And the drone will actually turn on automatically once you actually flip out all the propellers. It's a great feature that makes it a lot easier to use. Now on the front, you're actually gonna have two protective covers. So this plastic case, you just press on either side, pull straight out, and make sure you don't grab the camera when you do that and pull on the camera. And then there's this little silicone cover. This is something that I haven't seen on previous drones. However, it keeps the camera a little bit more safe in that plastic cover. Personally, I don't think you need to use this silicone cover, but it is an extra layer of protection if you want to use it and put it on and off. So in the front, you have your camera on the bottom, you have your gimbal, which is going to keep the image completely stable when you're flying. And when it's turned on, you'll see that the camera just stays perfectly centered as you spin the drone around. However, on the front, you're going to see your different mode indicators, and they're going to be little lights that pop up. So there's two buttons to operate this drone. One is on the left and one is on the right. So if we click the one that is near the USB-C and micro SD card slot, it will switch the modes. So if we go through them, circle, rocket. Each time you'll notice spotlight, that on the front of it, direction track, there's a little indicator that tells you which mode you're in. Follow. So it's a little icon, and it switches through them as you switch through the different rocket modes. And also there's a little light indicator that's telling you what's going on with the drone. So I have the drone facing sideways, it's not ready to take off and it's just flashing red, pulsing. But if I put it on my hand ready to take off, it switches to a pulsing red and a yellow. So it's gonna give you different indications depending on what's going on with the drone. So if you look on the left side of the drone, you'll find a USB-C and a micro SD card slot and this mode button. So the micro SD card slot is gonna allow you to put in some external memory so that you can put a bigger card in here and be able to fly for longer periods of time and not have to transfer it off the drone. With the DJI Neo, you don't have this. So this is a huge advantage of this drone. Now the USB-C is used for a few reasons. You can plug this in and actually charge the battery that's on the drone, or you can plug this into your computer and you'll be able to pull all the footage off the internal memory, as well as you could pull the footage off of the micro SD card that's plugged into the drone at the same time. Now, on the other side of the drone, there's another button, and this is your power button. You press once and hold, and the drone will power off. Now, if your drone's off and it's folded out, then to turn on the drone, you'll just use this button, you press once and hold till all the lights turn on, and the drone will power on. Now on the top and the back, you'll see the battery. To take the battery in and out, you just have to press the two buttons on either side of the battery and pull straight back, and the battery will pop out. Now to put the battery in, you just push it in and push down, and you'll hear a click. You want to make sure that you hear a click so that the battery doesn't fall out when you're out flying. Now on the front where your indicators are that tell you what's going on with the drone, this is also where your vision sensors are. So this is where if you're flying towards an object, the drone will actually stop because it can sense objects in front of it. So it has a vision sensor here in the front of the drone. Now you also have vision sensors on the bottom of the drone. This allows it to take off and land and be able to judge how far away the drone is from the ground. And you'll see this when we actually get into the app. You'll be able to see how much of distance you have from the ground when you're landing and taking off. Or if you're flying low to the ground, you'll see that it gives you an indication that there is ground below you, like 3 or 4 feet, depending on how high you're flying. Now, the only other thing that you need to know about this drone is how to change the propellers, because if you do have an issue where you break a propeller, something comes through these propeller guards, well, then you're gonna have to fix the propeller. So on the top of each propeller, there is a series of screws, and you'll have to take off all 3 of these screws. And then on each propeller, you'll see that there is a little screw. And so you'll need to take off each one individually and replace them depending on which one is broken. And you're gonna find that there's 2 different styles of propellers. One has a little line on it, and one does not have a line on it. And so the one with the line goes in the back left and the front right, and the one without the line goes in the front left and the back right. And so that's everything that you need to know about this drone. One of the coolest features with this drone is being able to control it without having to use your phone or a controller. So you can just fly this using your hand, and it's fairly simple to do. So when you want to get the drone out and ready to go, you just flip out all 4 propellers and the drone's going to automatically turn on. If it doesn't, you can power it on pressing once and then holding the power button until all 4 lights power up, and then you'll hear the chime. Now there's 6 different modes that you can fly in, and these are all quick shot automations, and 2 of them are following, tracking modes. And it uses the AI built into this to intelligently follow you wherever you go. So right now it's in spotlight mode, and you could use the button on the side that has the micro SD card slot and the USB-C to change your mode, and you just press once. Follow. So let's put it into follow mode. Now to take off the drone, it's fairly simple. You just hold the button that you used for the mode for 3 seconds. It will go into a sequence where it starts to take off. Keep your hand as still as possible, and as long as you keep it stable, the drone will pick up, it'll intelligently find you, so it's gonna lock onto you as the subject, and then you can start moving and it's gonna follow. So because we're in follow mode, it's gonna get a little bit distance away and then it's gonna start following. So let's do this. Hold for 3 seconds. Okay, so now as I walk, drone's just gonna follow. So we're just gonna keep wandering up this mountain, and the drone is gonna be consistently following us the entire time. And you can see here's a little reverse shot. So, I'm holding my whole tripod to, film this right now. So you can see that from the drone shot, and then from behind me, you can see it's just peeking out back there. And I have it set to high and far. And when we get into the phone, I'll show you how you can change the settings. So whatever you set it to in the phone, it's gonna lock into those settings. And then every time you take it off, it's just gonna use those same settings again and again until you change the settings in the phone. So you could set it up with your phone, and then you don't need your phone to be able to operate this drone. It's pretty wild. So let's get to the top of this mountain and let me show you how to bring it back down. Now, when you're ready to land, you turn into follow mode, stop, and then walk towards it. Put your hand out, it's gonna find your hand. Even if it's super windy like it is right now, it will drop nicely into your palm. Check, 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 check. The microphone wasn't connected on that last shot, but when you hold out your hand, it's gonna automatically drop, even if it's in windy conditions like it is right now. So every time you do one of these quick shot automations using just the hand launch, the camera's gonna automatically start recording when it gets into position. So I'm gonna show you a few of the different modes here, and when the drone takes off, it will start recording as soon as it gets into position. So let's go through these and let me show you what you can do with these different modes. Let's switch it. So now we're gonna hit the button again, and let's do a droney. And so the droney is it's gonna show this kind of epic shot where it's gonna fly out and away, kind of revealing where we're at.
6 meters. Droney. 3, 2, 1.
So it's gonna use the tracking to find the subject, and then it's gonna start flying away. And it's gonna record 2 shots on the Droney. So it's gonna record out and away, and then it's also gonna record as it comes back. Just like that, you put your palm out and it stops recording and it drops down and stops the propellers. Now, when you're doing this, make sure you don't put your fingers up like this because you don't want to accidentally go through the propeller guards. Just keep your palm nice and flat. All right, let's do the next one.
Circle.
Circle, this one's cool. So it's gonna do a loop all the way around us and create just kind of a orbit shot. Shows where we're at. We're on a mountaintop. The only thing I have to worry about is a little bush over there. So let's hopefully we don't hit it.
2 meters. Circle.
Because we have no side-to-side detection.
1.
So it's gonna take off, it's gonna fly away from me, get into position, and then it's gonna start the circle around. And it's keeping a pretty tight circle with the settings that I have set up. So it's just gonna go around as we look out at this beautiful vista. It's gonna keep going around until it gets to a full circle. And when it's done with the full circle, it's gonna stop recording. It's gonna fly back towards me. And then I put my hand out. All right, let's do the next one.
Rocket.
Rocket. So this one is supposed to shoot straight up in the sky and look straight down. And hopefully it's not too bumpy with this wind, but we'll see how it looks.
3, 2, 1.
It's off. Now it's gonna go straight up and it's gonna keep the gimbal pointing down as it does it. So Spotlight's interesting because it's just gonna get to a certain position and then it just sits there like a tripod in the sky. And so let's do that this way so the drone stays over the path and not over the edges. And basically the drone's gonna be a tripod in the sky and it's just gonna follow us wherever we go. So the drone will just continue to follow whether I'm getting close or I'm walking farther away. And it will just spin in a circle. So it always just keeps you centered wherever you're at. When you're done, you walk up to it and you just put your hand out and it falls into your hand nicely.
Direction track.
Now the last mode that we have out of the box is direction track. You could actually switch this in your phone for a different mode as well, and I'll show you that once we get into the phone. But direction track, the drone's gonna stay in front of us. Now there's no backwards sensor, so you have to watch where it's going, but the point of direction track is that it stays in front of you. You could do like a walk and talk, which is pretty cool. So let's do it. Let's pull you over here so you can see this in action.
1.
So now I'll just walk and the drone's gonna stay going that way, backwards, and I could do like this walk and talk. So it's fighting the wind. The drone's kind of at a slant, but the camera's trying to keep it centered the entire time and keep a good shot of me. So I could stop at any point and the drone's gonna stop and then it's gonna come back towards me. And with the direction track to land it, it's a little bit different. And so you just gotta play with it. Basically, you're gonna be moving forward, the drone's gonna be flying away from you, so you can't like walk towards it to get it. So you have to just stop, drone's gonna fly back to you, and you just gotta be patient because it will eventually happen. The drone will fly back to you, put your hand out, drops in. So it's the only one that's kind of odd in terms of the return, and you gotta be a little bit patient and not like keep going towards it, because every time you go towards it, it keeps going backwards. So kind of a cool way to do some walk and talks if you wanna have this moving camera and you're out as a solo creator. But that's basically everything that's on the drone itself. Like I said, you could switch the direction tracks to a different mode, and you'll find that once we dig into the phone and we actually look at everything that you can do in the phone app. So let's get into the phone. All right, let me show you how to fly using your phone. And so we're gonna go through automation using the phone, but also how you can fly completely manual using your phone, because your phone can act like a controller, just like you would use something like the DJI RC2. However, you don't need to have a controller. You can control it using your phone. So we're gonna pull up DJI Fly on the phone, and then we're gonna pull out our drone. So flip the front 2 propellers forward, the back 2 propellers backwards. It's gonna automatically turn on. And then this is the screen that you're gonna see on the phone app. So there's gonna be a few different things on here that you can use. And so there's gonna be some different things on here that you could check out. There's like some tutorials here. There's some different shots from other creators. You also have before you fly. So you could click this before you fly, and it's gonna show a map of where you're at. And so you could zoom in and see if there's any flight restrictions. You could also see some ideas of shots. So if you look here, Dana Point, there's a picture of the harbor here. So this is an interesting place that you could go film, place that I've filmed before. And yeah, there's some cool spots you could film right there. No issues with flight restrictions at the moment. And let's go up towards LA so I could show you where there's some flight restrictions. So if we get into LA, you can see all of a sudden there's all of these flight restrictions. So say you wanted to film, I don't know, in El Segundo. Let's tap right there. It's gonna show you that there's an enhanced warning zone. And when we go back to the map, you could see that, well, yeah, there's an airport right there, so you can't fly. You can't fly within miles of an airport unless you have specific authorization to be able to fly there. So basically, you could use this before you fly to be able to see if you're in a location that you can actually fly in. And when you look at LA, there is a lot of no-fly zones everywhere. And you have to also look at temporary flight restrictions, which is a no-fly zone for a specific time. So I'm filming this whole beginner's guide during the fires that are happening up in LA, and there's a TFR all around that fire zone. And so you wouldn't be able to fly anywhere around that, and it's against federal regulations if you do fly in those zones. So you wanna make sure you check out the before you fly to see if there's any flight restrictions generally, see if there's any flight restrictions, but also you wanna check TFRs to make sure if there's anything going on specifically in that space. And a TFR might come up if there's, say, like a president in town or a natural disaster or military exercises going on. Like there's a bunch of different reasons that there could be a TFR in a space that you otherwise could fly. That's just a word of caution because I've seen a lot of people flying recently during this TFR with all these fires going on. And so it's something that you need to pay attention to because it is a federal crime if you fly in a TFR. All right, so let me just show you another area. So if we were to go out here into the desert, let's say I wanted to film somewhere out here, you can see that there is no flight restrictions. So just pay attention to your airspace. You need to fly in Class G airspace unless you have authorization to be in other airspaces. And one other thing about this whole before you fly, you can have this on your phone when you're using the controller and it's not connected to Wi-Fi, you won't have this. So just make sure you check on your phone if you're safe to fly before you pull out the flip with the controller and start flying. How's my exposure? Is it a little bright out here? Let's dip it down. Okay, so you have your drone turned on, you have your DJI Fly pulled up. So you could either just click right here, the connect button, or you could click connection guide. So connection guide, I'll hit my flip because that's what we're using. And you can see that there's 2 options. So with the flip, you can either connect with the mobile device or RC only. So we're gonna connect mobile device because that's what we're talking about in this section. Select your flip, you'll join it, and it'll give you this little checklist. Make sure you're in a well-lit area. Avoid textureless reflective ground. It could cause issues with your sensors. Fly in open areas. We're in a big open area. Do not fly off a bridge or a balcony. There could be an updraft, there could be some sort of wind event, it could cause the drone to dip. Avoid taking off and landing in rocks, sand, or grass. With this drone, it's very close to the ground. So if you're in the grass, it might get caught in there, sticks or rocks or whatever. I've been flying this around here in some different areas, and there's definitely some times where like things are getting in these propellers if it lands on the ground. So ideally, you'll wanna take off and land from your hand if possible, or find somewhere like a concrete or something flat where nothing can get in the propellers. And then it says you want to avoid water. Basically, you don't want to get close to the water because water goes up and down, it rises up and down. I've had a drone years ago going over a lake, and the lake water was moving just enough that it grabbed the drone and pulled it in. You want to avoid water that's moving, and also it causes reflective surfaces, so there could be a chance that your drone will mistake it for the ground and try to land in the water. It's not good. So if you're going to fly over water, I highly suggest higher. Don't go right over the water, And just be cautious, like practice over water before you really go out there and try to get some interesting shots that are going over like an ocean or a big body of water. All right, hit got it. So for your first flight, it's gonna say takeoff, film and follow mode, land, switch modes. Basically, there's a tutorial here that takes you through some different ideas on how to start using this drone. And we're gonna explain all that in this section. So we're gonna skip this tutorial. So mine says storage full. However, I've pulled everything off of this drone already on my computer. So we're gonna format the card together before we start flying. So I'm gonna go down here in the bottom right corner, which is settings, and we're gonna go to camera settings, and we'll scroll down to the bottom where it shows our internal storage and our SD card. So internal storage says 1.9 gigs and I only have 6 megabytes left. So I'm gonna format that. I'm gonna format my internal storage and we are now clear. So now I have all my data left on the internal storage. I still have 60 gigabytes on my micro SD card, so I don't need to format that yet. Let's go back to our controls and let's talk about everything you're gonna find on the screen. So in the upper left-hand corner, there's that little back button. This will go back to this main home screen and you'll see that there's a FlySafe update. So whenever you see an update, you wanna make sure you click this. So I'm gonna update and we'll hang out here for a second while it's updating the FlySafe data. All right, everything's updated, so we'll hit go fly again. Okay, so now let's just go over everything you're gonna find on the screen. So next to that, there's gonna be this icon that says takeoff permitted. So it said storage was full when it was full, but now it's gonna give me notifications about the drone. Where we're at, takeoff is permitted, so we could start going. Now I could click that and it's gonna give you a flight checklist, and also it's just gonna show you any notifications that pop up about what's going on in the area that you're filming. Next to that is your battery. So mine says 95 and it shows 0000. When we take off and start flying, you'll see that there'll actually be a number here that indicates how much battery you have left. So I'll say 20 minutes or 10 minutes. And so you'll be able to see right here how much battery you have. Next to that is your signal strength between your phone and the drone. So when we're flying manually, this is important because the drone can't get very far from the phone before it loses signal. So you'll want to make sure that you have a strong signal between your phone and the drone, because when you're flying manually with the phone, it's limited. And one thing that I've noticed is even turning my body away from the phone and putting that between the drone and the phone, it causes it to break out. So you just want a clear line of sight, and you're gonna be flying manual just to get small shots around. It's not gonna be to get really far out there, like flying way out in the distance, getting these big sweeping shots. It's more for manually controlling in the area that you're in, clear line of sight, and it's just to get some quick shots. And so next to that, there's a little arrow with these red lines. This is your obstacle avoidance on the front. So the front of the drone has vision sensors that will stop it from running into something. And this is just telling you whether they are working or not. So when you're flying, just pay attention to that. Now, underneath that, the big screen, you have obviously your view of the camera. And on the left-hand side, this is to control your gimbal. So you could tilt this up and down. So if you want to have the gimbal looking at a different direction when you're out flying. Now underneath that, you'll see that you have all your controls. Now right in the center, this is the mode that you're flying in. So out of the box, you get manual, follow, droney, circle, rocket, spotlight, and direction track. And the direction track can actually be changed. So if you go over to settings in the bottom right-hand corner, you see the custom says direction track. So you click this and you could switch between helix, boomerang, and direction track. And so we've already showed you all the different modes, but I'll show you helix and boomerang in a second because these are two different modes that you can use as well. They create some pretty cool shots. Now back on this main screen, next to the direction track on the left is your landing icon. Right now it's grayed out because the drone's not taken off, but when it's in the sky, I'll be able to land using this button. And the other side is this little speech bubble. This is for voice commands. And so you could use voice commands to actually control the drone. So when you're recording, here's all the different commands that you could use. When it's following you, you could say closer, further, higher, lower. So if the drone's following you, it's a good idea to use these to change where the drone is in the sky. And for safety, you could say stop, or you could say brake, or you could say land. And so you could control your drone using voice. And so you could turn this on, and so you could say, hey, fly.
Go ahead.
Take off.
No problem.
So now it's following me, and I'm just doing voice commands. So I could say, hey, fly.
Here.
Lower.
Okay.
Hey, fly.
Here.
Higher.
Okay.
So interesting feature, definitely something to play around with and really see if it's something that's useful for you. So underneath the voice command, there's an icon for recording audio with your drone. So when this is on, the audio from your phone is going to be recorded on the drone. And so you could use the audio straight from your phone, just like this, or you could connect a Bluetooth device to your phone, like the DJI Mic Mini, and be able to use that for audio, and it's being recorded on the drone. So it gives you the ability to actually have a conversation with the drone following you. So it's a great way to do a walk and talk if you're by yourself. Now in the middle, there's the start button. So you just tap this button in the middle and the drone will take off. And we'll take off in a minute. I'll show you some of the moves, but let me go through the rest of the stuff that you're gonna find on the screen. So underneath that is the settings for the current mode that you're in. So you could change how far. So it could be close, medium, or far. You could change your height, low, flat, high, depending on which automation that you're using. Follow, droney, circle, rocket, spotlight, direction track, helix, and boomerang. And all of them are gonna have a little bit different. So we'll go over to droney, and you'll see that the different things that you have are the max distance, and the height, and the camera mode is just video. So each setting will have a different things to tweak to show how much distance you want to have from your subject to the drone. So it could be further, it could be closer, and how you want it to move. So for the droney, you could have it rise up in the air, or you could just have it stay flat. So there's different options. I highly suggest going through each automation and playing with each setting so you could really get a sense of how these work, because I could show you what each one does and we could go through every single thing, but I think when you play with it yourself and you go out and you actually see the distance and how the footage looks, you'll figure out which modes work best for you and what you like to use when you're out flying. So go out to a big field like this, baseball field or something, or a big open park, and just play with every mode and just record each one and then watch the shot. And you'll really get a feel for how this drone flies at the sky and what kind of footage you can get. Big thing with any drone flying is that you always just want to be practicing. You want to learn everything about your drone, play with every feature, so that when you're in an epic location, you're up on, say, a mountaintop and you want to get this awesome view, you know exactly which setting to turn on if you're using an automation, or you pull out the controller, you know exactly how to fly to get a good shot. It really comes down to understanding everything about the drone before you get in a situation where you have a really epic shot potential. All right, now down at the bottom, you have album, controls, or setting. We've been in controls this whole time, but if you click over to album, you can see all the footage that's on the drone. And this is where you could use your quick shot to transfer to your phone. So that shot we just did, where I just did the follow, it's right here today in this upper left-hand corner. So I'll click this, we can watch it. And if I want to transfer that, I can hit the button in the upper right-hand corner. I can hit download, go back to the screen. You can see that it's downloading the file and how quick it's transferring. It says quick transfer in process. Great, it's exported. Now, if we go to my photos, you'll see now I have this in my photos, and I can start editing it with whatever software I'm using on my phone. And this has audio because I was using the record audio feature. And one thing you'll notice when you're using the record audio feature, it does noise cancellation. So it's doing some processing to the audio. You can't hear the drone at all. That's one of the really cool features, is when you're using this voice command built into the phone, it cancels out the noise of the drone. That is one thing that I know a lot of you are interested in, like, can you still hear the buzzing of the drone? You can't, because it uses that noise cancellation. And if you have a good mic paired with the phone, you can get some decent audio doing this walk and talk style. Now, if we go back to this main control screen and we hit settings, this is where you'll find all the settings for the different automation modes and also all your camera settings as well. So you could go through any one of these, like say rocket, change your height, rotation, and also you get a little preview at the top that shows you what the move is. So if you ever want to have a quick reference of like, oh yeah, what does that shot look like? Maybe I'll click circle. Oh yeah, that's right. Circle is, spinning around, it's an orbit. Or if I wanted to say go to boomerang, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, so it goes up and boomerangs back down. All right, so I just have a quick reference of what that shot is. So at the top, you have your resolution and your frame rate. Now, you have to keep in mind, whatever mode you're in might have some limitations. So right now I'm in follow mode, and it only allows me to do 30 frames per second in the follow mode. However, if I switch back to my manual controls and then go to camera settings, I now have access to all the different frame rates. So I could go from 24, 25, 30, 48, 50, and 60. So you see, make sure that you're in the right setting that you want to be flying in, and then you can change the resolution and the frame rate that best fits what you're filming. So if you wanted to shoot 4K 60 and do some slow motion, you make sure you're in a mode that allows you to do 4K 60. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at your settings. Make sure you know which mode you're in so that you make sure that you have all the options available if you want some of these extra options like 4K 60. Now you can shoot in D-Log-M, which is a flat color profile. And this color profile makes it easier to be able to color grade your footage later, and it just gives you more flexibility. And in this video, I've been shooting everything in D-Log-M, and then I color grade with my set of adventure LUTs so that I could get a good look on all the footage when I'm actually in my editing software. However, if you're just doing quick uploads and you don't want to color grade your footage, you could use the normal setting, and that actually opens up your encoding format to be H.264 or H.265. For D-Log-M, you only have H.265. Now, underneath this, you'll see that I have Chinese on my phone because I'm using a DJI FLY app that is pre-release. So this will be changed, and this is actually the option to be able to turn on the look on your footage so that it looks like you're shooting in normal. However, you're still filming in D-Log-M. And so this option is like for a pre-built LUT that's in the phone, and it just makes it so that when you're looking in the phone screen, it looks like it has contrast and saturation, even though you're recording the flat profile that you can color grade. And when you go to normal, you don't have that option because you're filming in normal. You have baked in contrast and saturation, and so you don't have as much room to color grade the footage. Now for photo, you have JPEG, RAW, or JPEG plus RAW, and you have 4x or 16:9. I always shoot in 4x3 because it's the full sensor. If you shoot in 16:9, you're basically cropping off the top and bottom, and I would rather have more data to be able to work with if I'm taking photos. Now you could shoot in 12 megapixel or 48 megapixel with this camera. Then you have a few more options in the general. So app recording, that is your audio recording. So if you want to record your audio when you're flying, you want this turned on. And then you could do your noise reduction here. So there's natural and pure. So there's two levels of noise cancellation that you can use when you're actually recording your audio. So I'd play with both of these and see which you think sounds better when you're doing this walk and talk style of video with your drone. And at the bottom, you have your storage. You have your internal storage, which is 1.9 gigabytes, and then you have whatever external storage you've plugged into the Flip. So that is everything in your camera settings, and there is some more settings. I know there's a lot to go through, and we have even more when we go into the controller, but all of this is important. So when we're in our settings and we go down to more settings, this is safety, control, and about. So for safety, you can tell the drone what it's going to do when it runs into something that's in its way. So let's say it's coming towards this camera. What do we want it to do? Do we want it to stop, or do we want it to keep going? Well, obviously we want to have it brake. But if you are trying to weave the drone through small spaces, like if I was to try to go through this dugout over here and I have control of it, I might turn this off because the braking will stop it going through like a doorway. And then underneath that, you have this display radar map, which shows you with a little line. So it'll pop up with a yellow and red line that says something's in front of the drone. Now you could calibrate your IMU and your compass. Don't really need to touch that unless the drone prompts you to do that. And then we'll go over to control. So you could change your display units. I'm using Imperial. You have your voice control settings. So it's that same menu that I showed you earlier when you're playing with your voice commands. You can calibrate your gimbal if you're having issues with your gimbal. You can also recenter your gimbal. So if the gimbal's facing downward, click this and it will snap up. And then your virtual joystick, you can change your stick mode. I just leave on mode 2, and that's what we're going to use throughout this entire video. Now in your about, you have everything about the drone, serial numbers, and it also shows you if you need to update your drone, there'll be a notification here. Let's go back to this main control screen and let's start flying. So I've already showed you how to fly using some of these automations and just hand launching. If you were to use these automations, it's the same kind of procedure, except for you could use the phone to start and stop the drone. Let's take the Flip and let's do a droney, and let's set this up. So we're gonna change our distance, and we're gonna do a flat one. Push the down button, hit start.
3, 2, 1.
And now the drone's gonna go through and do the droning. And if any point I want to stop, I can hit the stop button in the middle of the screen. But what it's going to do is do 2 shots. So as I showed you before, it does one going away and coming forward for this droney. So you could record your audio when you're doing these moves as well. So it's the same type. So you could use your phone to control, do all these automations, or you can do the hand launch, whatever makes sense for the scene that you're flying in. The thing that's different about the phone is you have these manual controls. So when I bring up manual controls, you'll now have a few different options that pop up. You have this button off to the left that is a camera or video icon, and this just switches between photo and video mode. And then when you switch this, you'll see that the button in the middle changes from white to red. So white is for taking photos, red is for doing video. And now your start is the takeoff button. So let's switch it to video mode, and let's just press and hold this middle button. Drone's gonna take off. And now you have these different controls that pop up. It's basically like two thumbsticks, but they're virtual controls. They're your virtual joysticks. And these are basically gonna be how you control the drone. So you'll just press in the middle where the little dot is, and then slide your finger to the left, right, up, and down to control the drone. So let's do a quick tutorial on how you fly a drone using the virtual joysticks. So I'm gonna move the drone right here so we get a shot of us. And basically you wanna think about your two joysticks as how you control the drone in space. So the one on the left is gonna keep the drone on a single point on the earth. But if you pull left or right, it's gonna rotate the drone. So I'm gonna rotate left, drone's gonna go in a left-hand circle. I'm gonna pull right, drone's gonna rotate in a right-hand circle. Now if I go up or down, it's gonna move the drone on that single point in the earth. So I point up, drone's gonna go up to the sky, pull down, drone is gonna come down towards the ground. Now, the right joystick in stick mode 2 basically takes you away from that single point on the earth. So if I go forward, the drone's gonna move forwards towards us. If I pull backwards, the drone's gonna move backwards away from us. If I move left, the drone's gonna slide to the left while keeping the camera straight on. And if I move to the right, the drone's gonna slide to the right while keeping the camera straight. So you'll use a combination of both of these joysticks to be able to create some interesting shots. So let's say I wanna do an orbit around us. So I kinda wanna spin around, but I wanna do it manually. So I'd pull right on the right joystick while pulling left on the left joystick. And I'm gonna do small movements, and then I'll start to create an orbit around us. And I'm manually controlling it. So I could change the speed based on how much I pull outwards on either one of these joysticks. I'm gonna pause it because there's a fence over there and I don't wanna hit it. Now, if I wanted to go towards us and then raise up past us, I'll pull up on the right joystick while pulling up on the left joystick. So let's go forward and then up. Now I wanna have the drone be like a tripod in the sky, but I wanna pan the camera to see the view. So I'll just pull left on that left joystick while not doing anything with the right joystick, and I'll create a nice pan of this beautiful park that we're at. You can see we're pretty far away, but in the upper right-hand corner, my communication is in red. So that's basically the limit that I can get from the drone to the phone before it starts losing signal. So I'm gonna pull down on the left joystick and forward on the right joystick and bring it back towards us. So at any point, if I wanna land it without using my hand, I could hit this button in the upper left-hand corner, press and hold, and the drone will go through an automation of just landing. That's how you fly manually using just your phone. But there's a few more things I want to show you in this app before we move on to the next section. So if we click down to our settings and we go to our custom, let's pull up helix and boomerang, and let me show you how those look. So we'll do helix and we'll do 32 feet. And basically what it's going to be doing is creating an upwards motion while spiraling. So let's go back to our controls, pull up helix, hit the start.
3, 2, 1.
And it's gonna go through and start actually creating this movement as it spins this way while spiraling up. So it's doing this big swooping motion, and it's gonna reveal the landscape that we're at. Like this would be perfect if you get to an epic view and you just want to have like this moving shot that reveals where you're at. And when it's done, the drone will return back to you. And now let's do the boomerang. So we'll go back to our settings. We'll go to boomerang. We'll go 32 feet. We'll go settings and we'll start it. Let's do the boomerang this way.
3, 2, 1.
This one, it kind of goes up, does a swooping motion and comes back down like a boomerang. And the cool thing when you're using the phone, if it is gonna run into something, you could stop it at any point. So drone is getting close to that fence, just missed it. But I had my finger on the stop ready to stop it if it was gonna hit it. And the drone's back to the original starting point. It's gonna fly forward and then I can land it in my hand. Now, the only other thing that you have control of is your gimbal. So as I showed you earlier, you can pull your gimbal down, or you could bring the gimbal up. And so you could change what the gimbal is looking at, and you have a wide range with this gimbal. You go up 35 degrees, and you could go down even more. So if you want a straight down shot, bring it all the way down to 90, raise up, move over us so you can see our shadows. And now I could rotate and you can see my shadow as I spin around. So that is everything with how you control your drone using your phone. And if you want ideas on how to get interesting shots using the two virtual joysticks, well, I have a whole video that goes over 100 different drone moves, and we'll take you through all the different ways you can move these thumbsticks to be able to get some interesting looking footage. So after you're done with this video, I'll put a link down below the description to where you can check that out, so you can see a ton of ideas on how to actually fly the drone in the sky to get some interesting looking footage. So let's talk about the controller options that you can use when you're flying the DJI FLIP. So you could use either the RC2, which has the integrated screen built in, or you could use the RC, which is the one that uses your phone on the top. The only major difference is that there's a few extra buttons on the RC2 and the screen. So personally, I always fly with the RC2. I think having an all-in-one unit just makes it so much easier to go out and fly, and then I could use my phone for other things. And I'm also not distracted when a phone call comes in, just like right now a phone call is coming in. So for the sake of this video, I'm gonna go over the DJI RC2 because this is the controller that I suggest you use when you're out flying. When you get this controller out of the box, there's not gonna be any joysticks on it. The joysticks actually sit in these nice little pockets in the back of the controller to hold them when it's packed away in, say, your backpack or the case that you're carrying in. So you just gotta pull them out and screw them on to where they go on the front of the controller. Now the two thumbsticks are how you're gonna control your drone. Now in another section of this video, we'll go through and we'll actually demonstrate some different drone moves and play around with flying the drone in different ways using these thumbsticks, but a lot of it is gonna come down to just practice. Now also on the front, you have 3 buttons. So in the far left, it says H and pause. This is your return to home. So at any point you can press and hold this H button and the drone's gonna automatically go into return to home. And so what that is a mode where the drone returns back to where it took off from. So when you first take the drone off, you're gonna hear it say home point updated. And the home point is gonna be wherever the drone took off from. Now, whenever you hit the return to home, that drone is gonna come back to that home point. Now also, if you're in an automation mode, so say you're using a quick shot or you're in like a focus track mode where the drone's tracking you, you can press this button once and it's gonna freeze the drone wherever it's at in the sky. So you just know that whenever you're actually flying the drone, if you need to just stop it immediately, hit the pause button. Now the middle button is actually a toggle. It goes from C, N, and S, and these are 3 different modes that allow you to change how fast the drone is moving. So Cine is like a slow cinematic style, N is normal, so it's kind of in the middle, and then S is for sport, which is really fast. And then next to that is your power button. And to turn on the controller, you just press it once and hold, and then the 4 lights will turn on and the drone will be powered on. Now looking on the top of this controller, you have 2 different antennae, and you just need to swivel these out and point them up at a 45-degree angle, the best position to get the reception between the controller and the drone. Now also on the top, you have a photo and a video button. These will switch the mode between photo and video mode, and then when you're in that mode, you press it again and it will start recording or it will start taking photos. Now also you have 2 jog wheels. The one on the left controls the gimbal up and down. So at any point you can control the gimbal looking down or up, and it goes past 90. So the gimbal will actually go higher than 90 degrees and look kind of up in the sky. The right side is gonna control your zoom, but if you pair it with some of the other custom buttons on this controller, you can have it do some different functions as well. And this drone has some different digital zoom options, and we'll show you those later in the video. Now on the back, you have 2 custom buttons, C1 and C2. And when we dive into the menus, you'll see that you'll be able to customize these to be able to do different things. So whatever you need immediately when you're flying, set it to these buttons, and so that you have different menu options quick. And you could set these to drone controls, or you could set these to camera controls. Just depends on what you need when you're out flying. Now on the bottom, you'll find a micro SD card slot and you'll find a USB-C. So the micro SD card slot, you can record what the screen is doing. So you'll see throughout this video, I have screen recordings, and that's because I'm using the feature where I can record the screen when I'm flying. Now the USB-C is gonna be used to charge this controller, and so you'll just wanna make sure that you're always fully charged before you go out and fly. And that's basically everything that you need to know about this RC2. The only difference with the smaller controller that uses your phone is that when you're putting your phone in, You just need to open up the top hinge and you'll be able to pull it out to fit different size phones. And there's gonna be a cable that you'll find inside the controller here. Now, this controller doesn't have the custom buttons, and instead of 2 buttons for photo video, it just has 1, but it has a toggle switch on the front that allows you to switch between photo and video mode. There also isn't a second jog wheel, so the only jog wheel that you have access to on this smaller controller is the one for the gimbal, and it has 1 custom button versus the 2 that are on the RC2. So it's a little bit more limited when you're out flying, but it does have everything that you need to get good shots. If you want to have a smaller setup and you want to use your phone, then this controller works just fine. However, like I said at the beginning of this section, I prefer the RC2. It just works much better when you're out flying. All right, let's get into the next section. In this section, we're gonna go through everything that you're gonna find in the DJI FLY app when you're connected to a controller. There is a lot of information here, and working with the DJI FLIP with the controller gives you access to a lot more flexibility to be able to fly this drone, and you could fly much further. When you have it just controlled with the phone or you're just doing it from the palm of your hand, the drone's only gonna go a limited distance. With the controller, it's gonna have a lot more range and you're gonna be able to fly it in different ways. That's gonna just open up the capabilities of this drone. So when you get the DJI FLIP, it should be automatically connected to the controller. However, if it's not, you basically just need to put it into pairing mode. So let me show you quickly how you would pair your drone if it's not showing up on your list of drones when you turn on the controller. So this is the screen that you're gonna see if you need to connect to the aircraft and it's not popping up automatically. So basically what you'll do is you'll click this button in the lower right-hand corner that says connect to aircraft, and it will walk you through step-by-step how you actually pair the drone. So you wanna remove the gimbal cover, flip out all the propellers, and then press and hold the power button until the drone turns on. And to power on the drone, you press once and hold, all the lights will turn on, and it says connection successful, and it will automatically go to your flying screen. Now, if that doesn't happen, what you would do is press and hold the power button and just hold it for like 5 seconds. And when you hear that peep, it's gonna be in pairing mode. And then you'll just wait on this screen until a little icon pops up on the bottom of the screen that says unable to connect to aircraft. And so you'll click that, push the button that says aircraft beep, and then you hit pair. Now the controller will start beeping, and it will stop beeping as soon as it's paired, and then it will go back into the fly screen. So if your drone is not connected, it's fairly easy to get it reconnected, but out of the box, you should be good to go. All right, let's set this over here. So this is your camera view, and we're gonna go over everything that you see in the camera view here. The upper left-hand corner, you click that little arrow, it goes back to that main home screen that we already saw. And this home screen will have a few different things that's gonna be useful for you. Now you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, there is an aircraft update. This is something that will pop up when you're connected to the internet. And if there's an update, just click update and it'll go through the process and update the drone. And you can click on the update to see more, and now you can see that the firmware is updating. So I highly suggest before you take it out into like the deep wilderness, I would hook this drone up to Wi-Fi, make sure that everything is updated, and then do a short test locally so that if there is any issues, you can take care of it before you get out somewhere, and then all of a sudden you can't fly the drone. So new firmware will pop up here and there, and you'll just want to go through and update the firmware because it's going to give you extra capabilities or fix issues with the drone. The upper right-hand corner, that's where you're going to have some tutorials. So if you're connected to Wi-Fi, then you can access some different tutorials around the DJI FLIP. Now on the left-hand side, there's a button for quick transfer to be able to quickly transfer the footage off of your drone. And then there's this button for service. And so if you ever have issues with your drone or you crashed it or you need something replaced, you can click the service button, and that's where you can access the menu that's all about how to service the drone. Now, one thing to consider is getting DJI's Care Refresh. And this is a comprehensive and reliable protection plan that offers accidental damage for collisions, flyaway, water damage, and natural wear and tear. A DJI service center will ship you a replacement as soon as they receive your product, and DJI will cover shipping costs both ways anytime a product is sent back. And DJI Care also includes online chat and call support. So if you ever have a problem with your drone, you can call them up and get it fixed. I'll include a link down below in the description to where you can check out more about DJI Care Refresh for the DJI FLIP. Now at the bottom, you have album, sky pixel, and profile. Your album is gonna access all of the footage that's on the drone. So I can click this and you can see that it's loading up all the different shots from today and the previous days that I've been shooting. So everything can be right here. And when you're looking at this footage, you could select different shots. You can watch them. You can also delete them, and you could favorite them. Also, if you want to do screen recording like I am, that's what you would have the micro SD card for. So you plug it in, you can pull down on the screen and there's a record screen button for the controller. So if you want to record the controller at any point when you're filming, you could do that and you could have access to seeing what you're seeing here in this video. Now, if we go back, SkyPixel is DJI's social media platform. So you can post your videos, you can post your photos on there, and you can connect with other pilots. Now, next to that is your profile. So this is gonna have all of your information about your DJI account. And you need to set up a DJI account to be able to fly your drone. It's gonna just save a lot of your data when you're out flying, and it's also just gonna give you access to authorize your drone and all of that. Now, when you're ready to fly, you could just click this Go Fly in the lower right-hand corner. So we're back on the camera screen. And at the top left corner, you're gonna see some notifications, and you're also gonna see this thing that says in mode. In mode is the mode that you're currently flying in. So right now I'm in normal. So on the controller, Cine Normal Sport mode, I'm in normal. So if I flip this, you'll see that it switches to C mode or S mode for sport or cine mode. Now, when you put it into sport mode, your front sensor is not gonna work anymore. So you might crash into something. In normal and cine mode, that front sensor is gonna stop you from running into stuff. So with this drone, you only have that front sensor, so it will help you from not running the drone into things when it's following you or if it's flying forwards, but that's the only sensor that it has. Now, next to that, you see there's notifications. Right now, mine says storage full. So if I click that, it's gonna pull up this flight checklist, and it's also gonna be a place where you're gonna find all of your notifications. And so mine's gonna say storage full, and you're gonna see that throughout this video. The storage is full on the internal card of the camera. So if you forget a micro SD card, you can record some footage within the drone itself. It's not very much data. So if we go over to our camera and we go to our internal storage, we only have 1.9 gigs available. So it's not very much data. I did like 3 or 4 shots in 4K 60, and I filled up that entire storage. However, with your micro SD card, you could put a big card in there. So I have 128 gigabytes in there, so I can record a ton of footage with the drone. However, with the current firmware that I'm using, when the internal is full, it says storage full up here, and it's not going away when I switch over to my micro SD card. If you're on a newer version of the firmware, this might not be showing as storage full if your internal is full. So just something to keep in mind. You're gonna see that in the upper left-hand corner the whole time I'm making this video, just because that internal storage is full at the moment. If that wasn't full, you would also see information about what's going on. This is just your notification bar. So you'll see different notifications pop up, and pay attention to what it says, because it's gonna give you information on what's going on. Now, when you click on this notification tab, you're gonna pull up this menu, and it's your flight checklist. So you could set your return to home altitude. So when you click the return to home button, the drone will fly to this altitude and then fly back. So you could set how high you want the drone to fly back. I don't need it to go super high, but if you're in a place with lots of trees, you might need that to be pretty high. You could set your max altitude and your max distance. So this will create limits so that your drone can't go above a certain height and a certain distance away. If you're here in the US, you can't fly above 400 feet above ground level, so you could set your 400-foot limit here. You make sure that there's a notification when you hit that limit. Now at the bottom, you see that we have both of our cards. We have our micro SD card and we have our internal storage. And there's this little blue button in the upper right-hand corner that allows you to format your storage, basically clear it. So make sure that you have everything transferred off before you hit that format. My internal storage has footage that's not on my computer yet, so I'm gonna leave that on here, and I'm not gonna format it until we go back to my office. Now let's continue right clockwise around the screen. So in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see this 94. When I click this, this is your battery. So right now it's showing 94% and it's showing 0000. That's because the drone's not flying, it's just sitting here. But if I was to take this drone off, so I'm gonna take off,
Home point updated.
and let it hover for a little bit just so that we can set up what's going on. Also, if you noticed, it just said home point updated, so notifications will pop up as stuff's happening in this upper left-hand corner. So now with the current way that I'm flying, I have 92% left of battery, which says I get around 22 minutes of flight time. And when you click this, it shows you all the different values of how long till you can return home, how long until a forced landing, and how long until the battery's completely depleted. So 18 minutes until the drone's gonna return to home, 21 minutes until a forced landing, so the drone's just gonna land wherever it's at, and 23 minutes until there's just no battery. So there's high wind right now, and that's what's going on. And so it's fighting that wind, and it's gonna make the battery deplete even faster. Next to that is your RC strength. So the drone is right there, has a strong signal, but as you fly a distance away, you'll see this start to drop, and it will get to the point, if you fly too far away, that it'll just lose the signal. Now, you could set up what happens when you lose the signal. Mine, I have it always set to return to home, so it always comes back to me when it loses the signal. But depending on how you're flying, you might need to do something different. And I'll show you in the deeper menu where that is. Now, next to that, you'll see this little triangle with the little radar in front of it. That's just showing you your front vision sensors. So what's going on with what's in front of the drone. So let me show you these vision sensors.
Takeoff.
And how these work. So I'm gonna...
Home point updated.
So when I click it, it says normal, the sensing system's working. It's basically just telling you, does it work or does it not? I'll switch over to sport mode, and now it shows that forward is unavailable. So now those sensors are gonna be turned off. Let's switch it back to normal, and I'm pointed at this column right here. As I get close to it, you'll see that there's these yellow, and it turns red if I get too close on the screen. That's showing me where there is something in front of the drone. And it's also gonna be beeping. You're just gonna hear this constant beeping. So that's what tells you if something's in front of the drone. And so as I back away, you'll see that those lines will disappear. And now you see that there's a downward sensor because there are sensors on the bottom of the drone. So it's telling me that the ground is 3 feet below, and you can see that right here. Now, next to the forward sensors, it says 27 with this little satellite icon. It just tells you how many satellites it's connected to. And if you don't have enough satellites connected, then it's gonna give you a warning. And it'll also tell you you're not ready to take off because you're not connected to satellites. So I have a strong signal, 27 satellites. Now the 3 dots, that's your advanced menu. And there's gonna be safety, control, camera, transmission, and about, and we'll go through all of those in a minute. A lot of information in there, but it's how you control everything about your drone. Now, underneath that, you have this little film strip icon. You can click this, and it goes to your different photo and video modes. So you have photo, video, master shots, quick shots, hyperlapse, and panoramic. So these are just the different ways that you can control this drone to capture footage or photos. And when you're in the video mode, you have access to slow motion, and this drone can shoot up to 4K 100 frames per second, so you could shoot some super slow motion with this drone. Now underneath this icon, you'll see that there's a record button. If I switch over to photo mode, you'll see that the icon above it changes. It's now this like photo icon, and now the button turns white. This is your record or your shutter for your photo. And at any point, you could use the top of the controller, the record or the photo button to switch between modes. So if I'm in photo mode, I click the record button, it's gonna switch over to the record mode, the video mode, and then I could click it again and it'll start recording. And same with photo, I could click the photo button, it's gonna go over to the photo mode, click it one more time, it's gonna take a photo. Now, next to this icon, you're gonna see a 1x and an autofocus. So you can manually focus with this drone if you want to. You could click this AF, switch over to manual focus. Now press and hold MF, and you could change your focus. So if you wanted to manually focus, like you were having issues with the autofocus, you could do that here and really just set your focus, lock it in, and it's just gonna stay on that one focus point. Personally, when I fly, I typically just leave it in autofocus, but you might have a reason that you wanna switch over to manual. Now, the 1x changes your zoom. So you could click this, and in 4K, you could go 2x, or you could go up to 3x. If we switch over to 1080p, you'll have access to even more zoom. So you have 1x, 2x, and 4x. Now, I just switched over to 1080p, and that storage full went away because now it's gonna allow me to shoot at 1080p 30 frames per second with the little bit of data that I have left in the internal storage. Now that that's gone, you could see that there is a notification here that says takeoff permitted. So if there was any warnings, like you're not connected to enough satellites or there's some other issue going on, it's gonna show up right here where it says takeoff permitted. Now underneath the red dot or the white dot, whatever mode you're in, is gonna be your library. So you could click this and it goes to that same library that we saw earlier where you could see all of your data that's on the drone. And it shows you everything. So you could go here, you could select, you could download everything that you need to do with the footage. It's a good idea to go in and look at your footage as you're flying to get a sense of what's going on. If you're getting the shots that you need, it's just always good to review your clips when you're out so that you make sure that you get the footage that you need when you're flying. Now at the bottom is gonna be all of your camera controls on this main flying screen. So when you're actually flying, you can control your camera and you can control manual or you could go full auto. So right now I'm in auto mode. That's this bottom right-hand corner. I click this once, it will go to pro mode and it opens up a lot of capabilities with the drone to be able to control the camera manually. So let's first start in auto. So in auto, there's gonna be 3 things that pop up. Your storage, which is how much data you have left on the card. So right now I have 4 hours left because I'm using the SD card that has 128 gigabytes. So I have a ton of data on this card. It shows my resolution and my frames per second. So right now I'm set to 1080p, 30 frames per second. And it shows my EV, my exposure value. So I could set this to be whatever exposure I want over what the drone thinks looks good. So right now, this is what the drone automatically thinks looks good. I click EV, and let's say it's a little bit too dark. I want to brighten it up. I could go plus 0.3 or plus 0.7, and it will brighten up the image from what the drone thinks looks best. Now, if I wanted to go to the extreme, I could go all the way up to plus 3, and you see it completely overexposes the image. You're probably never going to use that, but the capabilities are there if you need it. Same thing, if you need to go under, so let's say it's too bright, you can go down minus 3 stops. Now, for resolution and frames per second, you could change that here as well. So tap on it, and it pops up all the different resolutions that you have. So you have 1080p, 4K, 1080p 9:16, which is going to record a 9:16, a vertical, or 2.7K 9:16. So it gives you that ability to be able to shoot vertical content or horizontal content. And then when you're in any of the modes underneath, it shows your frames per second. So you could go from 24 all the way up to 60 in 1080p, and in 4K you could go up to 60 as well. If you want to access 100 frames per second for that slow motion, you'll click the little film strip, go over to slow motion, then you could go down to resolution and frames per second, click that, and you could go 4K up to 100 frames per second. Now, there is no other slow motion options besides 100 frames per second in the current firmware. So when you're shooting slow motion, you only have that one option. Go back to video. Now, if you want to take control of your camera and be able to change all the settings manually, you'll click this auto button. It's going to switch over to pro mode. Now, you have a lot more options here. And this is basically divided into 2 sections. So you have the camera options, and then you have all the other options on the left. So let's click the camera options. You're gonna have ISO, shutter, and then if either one of these is set to auto, you have your EV pop up again. So you could set your ISO manually and then have your shutter speed be auto, and then use your EV the same way that you would in the auto mode. Or you could take full manual control and do manual on both ISO and shutter. And so you could just toggle on the auto here on the left to whether you want that setting auto or not. The reason that you might take full control is if you're getting fluctuation in exposure, or you're using something like ND filters and you really want to have a controlled look and you want a specific look, you'll go in here and set it manually. A big part of this is if you want motion blur and you want that cinematic look, then you're going to want to bring your shutter speed to double that of your frame rate by using ND filters, and then control everything manually, and that's how you'll be able to get that footage. Now, if we click on these bars with these little dots, this is going to bring up the other options for your cameras. So you could change your white balance and have it be set manually, or you could have it be set auto. I always fly with mine on manual, and I just fly at whatever white balance I think looks best. Right now it's bright blue skies, so I'm going to shoot at 5600. Now underneath that you have your resolution, your frames per second, and then you have your color. So this drone will shoot both normal and D-Log M. Now, D-Log is a flat profile that allows you to do some more color grading in your editing software. And underneath that, you'll see it says Color Display Assist. So if I turn this off, you'll see what you're actually getting. It's this flat profile that then you go into your editing software and color grade. So you could put on this Color Display Assist just to visually see a quick reference of what it's gonna look like. However, the camera's gonna be recording this. It's gonna be recording the flat look. So if you don't want to be shooting in log, make sure this is set to normal, because if you're in D-Log M and you have Color Display Assist on, it's gonna look like you're shooting in normal, but you're actually shooting in log. So just make sure you're in the correct setting for how you wanna shoot and capture your footage. Now, if you are shooting in D-Log M, I have a whole set of dronelets that I've created specifically for D-Log M so that you could put them quickly on your footage and get a good look out of the scene that you're flying. I'll include a link to those down below in the description for you to check out. It just makes it super easy. I always color grade all my footage with my set of LUTs. It makes it so that I could quickly go through, just create a look across all of my footage and not really have to go shot by shot and do specific color grading unless I need to fix something specific like exposure of one shot to the next. Now underneath that, it has your coding format. It's H.265, your format for your video, which is MP4, and then your storage. And so you could go through here and switch between your 2 different storage modes. A lot of data, a lot to go through, but we're almost there. And then we're gonna get into the deeper menu. So on the left-hand side, it's gonna show your distance above you, so your distance flying up and down, and then your distance flying away. So as I fly, let's get the drone in the sky. And so now you'll see in the lower left-hand corner, it shows that I'm 14 feet above where I took off, and I'm 41 feet away. And now you'll see that there's 0 miles per hour next to both of those. It's because the drone's just hovering in the sky. But as I move, you'll see those numbers go up. So you'll see that I'm ascending into the sky, 2 miles per hour, while I'm moving sideways, 8 miles per hour. And then next to that is your maps. So if you click on this, you'll see right now, I have no maps downloaded. So it's just a white blank screen. And I'll show you a little bit later in this video how you can download some maps. so that you could see where you're flying. If you're connected to Wi-Fi, so if you're using your phone and you're using the other style of controller, then you would automatically have the maps pop up because you're connected to Wi-Fi. But if you're not connected to Wi-Fi and you haven't downloaded maps, this is just going to be a white blank screen. However, this will show you everything above where you're at, so you could see a visual representation of where the drone is in the sky related to you. And when you tap on the screen in the lower left-hand corner, it's going to make either the camera view go big or the map view go big. So with my current firmware, it's not letting me tap on any of these buttons to explain what they do. So let me just take you back to another one of my beginner's guides that explains this whole map and how it all works, and I'll show you with footage actually downloaded to the map. In the lower left-hand corner, you're gonna have your map icon. So you could expand this or you can bring it down so that it's minimal if you don't wanna look at it. But you could open this up and it's gonna show you a map of the area. Now you could see your flight path in blue, you could see your drone, and you could see where your controller's at. So just a lot of data on the screen so that you could see what's going on with your drone. At any point when you wanna make this full screen, you just tap on it in the corner and it's gonna make it full screen and it'll make your camera view smaller. So if you need to see where you're at and you wanna look at the map, well, you could do this and be able to see what's around you, and be able to see more if you need that when you're out flying. Now in this map mode, you have a few different icons that are gonna be helpful for when you're out flying. So the top is some information. It could show you all these different zones on your map. So if you wanna turn these on and off, you could do that here. You can erase your path. So this is the path I just flew. I could click the erase button and it's gonna be gone. I could center the map on the home point or the drone at any point. I could either change this to true north or which direction my controller is facing. And then I also have layers. So I have standard, satellite, or mixed. And with this controller, you only have access to what's downloaded onto the controller. So you're gonna wanna download the maps onto your controller of the area that you're gonna be flying when you're connected to Wi-Fi, because when you're not on Wi-Fi, this will just be a blank white screen. Now at any point you click the bottom left-hand corner and it'll bring up your camera view. And if you wanna minimize this, you hit the button in the lower left-hand corner and it goes away. Underneath that, you have Find My Drone. So at any point, if you lose your drone, like say it went into this tall grass over here, I've actually done it a few times, you might not be able to see it. And so on this page, you could click Start Flashing and Beeping, and the drone's gonna be flashing and beeping. And so if it's out there somewhere, you could try to find it by the sound, and it's also, if it's a little bit darker out, you'll be able to see the lights. At any point, you just stop it. And when you click Find My Drone, the icon of the drone will be its last known location. And so you could use that mixed with this beep to find the drone. And somewhere like this, where there's lots of tall grass and it's hard to see, it's a good feature to have. All right, now we're back to the DJI FLIP. So if you have this map pulled up, you could click this button in the lower right-hand corner and it's gonna pull up your radar. So it's gonna show where you are in relation to your drone, in relation to the home point. So it's just a quick overview that shows you how far and distance things are, the different places are away, and what direction everything's heading in relation to north. If you don't wanna see this radar or this map at any time, just click this button in the lower left-hand corner and it will go away. Now above that is your takeoff button. So you could click this, it's gonna pull up this takeoff. So you could press and hold this button and the drone's gonna automatically take off and then hover, fly around. And then when you're ready to land, click that button again. And when you're in motion, it's gonna show up with land or return to home. So because the drone's right here, I just need it to land. If I was flying the distance away, I would click the return to home button. It would point the drone where home is and start flying directly back towards us. And you'll see on the screen, it's got this green line that shows the path of where the drone's gonna go as it comes back home. But if you just wanna land it, you can just click the land button, press and hold, and the drone's gonna go through and do the whole landing sequence on its own. Now the button above that is your focus track, and you can't touch this unless you're in flight. So let's take the drone off again. So I'll push this button, hit takeoff. Okay, the drone's hovering, and then I'll click the focus track enabled. And now you're gonna see a little plus icon appear on your subject, whatever you want to track. So I could click this button, it's gonna automatically grab me, and then there's gonna be these different tracking features that are gonna pop up. And we'll go through all of the tracking in another section, but that's an easy way to turn on tracking. But if you don't wanna have that enabled, and you just wanna grab your subject quickly, you could just draw a box. So you put your finger in the upper left-hand corner, and then draw a box down into the lower right-hand corner of the size of the subject that you're trying to track, and then it will say focus track enabled and automatically grab them. And that's basically everything on the main camera screen. So now let's go into the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner, and let's go through all the deeper menus. So when you pull this up, the first one is your safety. And the first thing that you have is your flight assistance. So if you're flying towards an object, you can turn on your obstacle avoidance so that it brakes. So the drone will just stop as it gets close to something and it might run into it. You could turn this off if you don't want your drone to do that. And you might use that if you're flying like through small objects and you know the drone will be fine. It's got guards on it. So if you're flying in a way where you want to like go through these columns here, the obstacle avoidance might stop it. So you turn this off so that you could fly through objects. Now display radar map. That's those lines that I showed you when you are approaching something. You can turn that on or off. Now underneath that, you have your auto return to home value. So this is what height the drone will fly to before it returns to home. You can update your home point in here. So let's take the drone off. And now I've flown a little bit away. And so your drone automatically sets the home point every time it takes off. So let's fly over here. Now I'm a completely different spot. So I'll pull up these 3 dots, go to update home point. And now I could set my home point to either where the controller is or where the aircraft is. So if I was to walk somewhere with this controller, I could reset the home point to where the controller is, or I could reset it to where the aircraft is. So I could click it and reset the home point. And you'll need to have a map loaded to be able to use that feature. Now underneath that, you have your AR settings. So you could click this and you could show the different things on the screen when you're flying. So as you've noticed, when the drone's up in the sky, it'll show the home point as the H. And it'll also show that path, that green path of the return to home. And it'll also, when you're pointed straight down, it's gonna show a little icon of the drone on the ground. You could turn these on or off. I just leave them all on. Just gives me more indication of what's going on with my drone, but you could turn them off if you want to. Now underneath that, you have your flight protection, max altitude, max distance. And then underneath that, you have your sensors. So if you need to calibrate your compass or your IMU, you could do that here. I wouldn't suggest doing that unless you're having issues and the drone is prompting you to go through and calibrate it. Now underneath that, you have your battery info, which is just gonna have information about the battery that's currently plugged in. You have unlock geozone. So if you're flying in a restricted space and you need to unlock the ability to fly there, you could do that here through this unlock geozone. You could have the find my drone. So this is that same menu that you found on the map that allows you to find your drone with it beeping and flashing. And then you have some advanced safety settings. So if you click the advanced safety settings, you could set what happens when the drone loses the signal to the controller. So as I mentioned earlier, you could have it return to home, you could have it descend where it's at, so it just goes straight down, or you can have it hover. I always just have mine on set to return to home, so it's always gonna fly straight back to wherever I'm at. There's an option to have an emergency propeller stop. So if you push both thumbsticks in the center, it'll automatically shut off the drone and it will fall out of the sky. So just something to keep in mind. And right now mine's set to emergency only, so this will only activate if there's an emergency and the drone's like prompting me. Or you could set it to anytime. So that means anytime you put the thumbsticks in that position, the drone falls out of the sky. Let's go back to the menu. Now we're going into the control section. So in control, this is everything about controlling the drone. So you could set your units that you want to see on screen. I'm set to Imperial because that's what I use, but you could have metric in here as well. You could have zoom, so that's the text on screen. Mine's set to standard, but if I hit large, you'll see that everything on the screen just gets bigger. So if you want to see everything bigger, set it to large. Now you have gain and expo tuning. So this will change how the camera responds in the different modes. So cine, normal, and sport mode. So you could change your horizontal speed, your ascent speed, your descent speed, your angular velocity, your smoothness, your brake sensitivity, and you can also control your tilt and your tilt smoothness. So if you really wanted to dial in the settings for how the drone flies in cine, normal, and sport mode, you can go in here and tweak your settings. Oftentimes, just out of the box, the cine, normal, and sport mode works pretty well, and I usually just fly with the standard. However, you do want to have a little bit more control, you want things to maybe move slower or faster, you can go in here and tweak these settings. But this is definitely going to take some practice and really understanding how everything works to be able to understand what to change to get the drone to fly the way that you want to. I suggest if you're just starting out, just leave it on what comes out of the box and then play with it later on once you get a handle of flying this drone in the different ways that you're going to fly. Now next, you have option for gimbal modes, so follow and FPV. So follow is going to keep the horizon level the whole time, whereas FPV, as you turn, the drone is going to dip left and right like an FPV drone. So let's flip it into FPV mode. Let's take off. Now let's just fly, and you can see as I turn, the drone is banking like an FPV drone. Let's hit record. So as I go left and right, you see that the horizon dips left and right. So if you want that kind of FPV feel, then you'd switch over to FPV mode, and it gives you that kind of like feeling where the world shifts as you turn left and right. Now, if you're having issues with your gimbal, the next mode is for gimbal calibration, and you can go in here and recalibrate the gimbal. Now, underneath that, you have recenter gimbal, so if the gimbal's like facing down, click this, it'll snap back up to the center. It's facing straight down, I can click this button, come back, and now it's facing me. Now underneath this, you have your stick mode. So this is how the joysticks work. Out of the box, you get stick mode 2, and that's how I typically fly my drone. But if you're used to another stick mode, you can go in here and change that here. There's 1, 2, 3, and you can customize it as well. Now underneath that, you have button customization. So you have 2 buttons on the back of this controller, and you have different jog wheels. So you could change all of these on this screen here to be able to change different features when you're out flying. So with the C1 button, you have all these different options between control and camera. So you have different things that you could do with the drone, or if you want to control different aspects of the camera, you could set that here. You could set that with the same with the C2 button. And then you have your right dial, which is automatically set to zoom in and out. And then there's a couple options to do a C1 plus the right dial. So mine has it set to adjust shutter speed, and then C2 with right dial and adjust the ISO. So everything is for that right dial, and the left dial is just to always control your gimbal. And at the bottom, there is a flight tutorial. So if you want to know step-by-step how to fly this drone, and you want to just do that when you're out flying and you're in the moment, you can click that and it'll take you through a guide. Now at the bottom, there's a repair to aircraft. So if it ever disconnects, well, you could repair here. Now let's go to the next section, which is all about the camera. So this is all of your settings about the camera. So it shows your video format, shows your color, so it's the same normal and D-Log, your color display assist, which gives you that look over the D-Log footage so that you can see what you're getting. Underneath that, you have your coding format, H.265, and then you have video subtitles. So video subtitles, when you turn it on, nothing's gonna change. However, the footage can be brought into a software that can read subtitles, and then all of your telemetry data and all of your camera data is gonna be in the subtitles. So it'll show you things like shutter speed, ISO, and it will show you your distance away, your distance high, how fast you're moving. It'll show your GPS coordinates. All of that data will be baked in. So if you wanna have that data, turn your subtitles on. Now underneath that, if you have issues with flickering, you can turn this on. You have auto 50 Hertz or 60 Hertz. I always just keep mine on auto and it's fine. Now underneath that you have your histogram, and so this is going to show all of your exposure values on a graph, from the left being the darkest all the way up to the right being the brightest. So white is on the right, black is on the left, and this shows all of your exposure values on a graph. So the next option down is your peaking level. So if you are using manual focus, I highly suggest turn on peaking, and this will show you boosted focus by adding some different colors on the screen. So let's turn it to high, let's turn it to normal. And you'll see that when I hit to manual mode, there's a red line around what's in focus. And when I switch my focus, you'll see that the red line goes away. But when I go back to focusing on me, you'll see that now there's a red line around what is in focus. So if you are doing manual focus, I highly suggest using this feature for peaking. Now next is your overexposure warning. So you turn this on, and on screen you're gonna see what's being overexposed. Right now, nothing. But if I use my exposure value, kick it up to +3, everything with the white zebras is overexposed, meaning that if it's overexposed, it's just gonna be white in your footage. And it's not gonna look good if you're shooting a big sky, a big landscape, and the sky is all just white. So use this to kind of judge your exposure and make sure that you're getting an exposure and that nothing's overexposing that you don't want to overexpose. All right, next is grid lines. So you could put across, 3/4, or you could put a center mark. And so you could use these if you want to say have your center, a little cross in the center, or you want to put on your thirds, or you want to put on the cross. And you could put all 3 on if you want to at the same time. It is just a lot of stuff on screen if you do that, but they're good to help with composition when you're out flying. Now underneath that you have your frame guide. And so you could turn this on if you want to see these different formats when you're flying. So if you're flying and this is going to be used for widescreen, well, you could put on a widescreen frame guide, and it will show you what the frame would be once you crop the footage. And you could go through if you want to shoot 16:9 footage and then have your 9:16 vertical as an option. It shows you both so that you can capture the full 16:9 image, so you could use horizontal, but if you want to also use that for vertical at the same time, turn this on so you could see both. Now underneath that, you're going to have your white balance, so you could set manual, auto, and you could set your setting here depending on what the white balance is that you want. Now underneath that, you have your style, so you could change your sharpness and your noise reduction. So if the footage is looking too sharp, you can bring this down to -2, and if you're seeing like blockiness, noise reduction going on, you could bring down your noise reduction to -2. You could also add more sharpening and add more noise reduction. So 2 above 0 or 1 above 0 for noise reduction. So it just depends on if you want to have a different look at your footage. You can leave these at 0 and just let it be what's out of the box, but you can bring down your sharpening if you think it just has too much of that over sharpened look. Now underneath that, you have your storage, so your SD card and your internal storage. And then underneath that, you have custom folder file naming, so you could change the file name if that's something that you need when you're out flying. And then there's also this cache when recording. So if this is turned on, the controller will automatically record a backup of what the drone is filming, but it will do it on the controller. So it will be a low res version if you wanted to have that backup when you're out flying. And then at the bottom, you could reset your camera parameters. All right, let's switch over to photo mode, and you'll see that the settings will change slightly. So when we go to camera in the photo mode, go back up to the top, you now have a few different options. You have JPEG, RAW, JPEG plus RAW. That basically tells you what type of format you're recording in. So if you want to just do JPEG, click that, but if you want both, you could click JPEG plus RAW. You could do your aspect ratio. I highly suggest taking your photos in 4:3 because that's more of the sensor. 16:9 is gonna crop the image. So I always suggest just always taking photos in the 4:3 mode. And then your resolution, you could do 12 megapixel or 48 megapixel. And then underneath that is all the same menus that we saw in the video mode. Let's go back to the photo screen. So now you'll see I have this 4:3 image. In the lower right-hand corner, if you click this button, you'll see that the format shows up instead of resolution and frame rate. And if we go over to Pro mode, same thing. You click the left-hand side and you'll have the options for photos. So you'll have JPEG, JPEG plus RAW, aspect ratio, and resolution. So depending on which mode that you're in, you'll have access to all the different customization features when you have the mode turned on in both the menu in the bottom and the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. Now, next section is all about transmission. That's the transmission between the controller and the drone. And this is also where you could set up your live streaming if you want to go in and set up live streaming to any platform straight from your drone. Now, I just leave all of this on what comes out of the box, dual band and auto. Don't need to touch that, but those options are there if you do need to tweak them because you're having issues with transmission. And then the last section is your about, which is everything about your drone. It's going to have your serial numbers. It's also going to be a place where you could check for updates. And so that's basically everything with the DJI FLY app. So I know there was a lot to go over in that, but everything's important and all of it's going to be helpful when you're out flying to be able to get the best looking footage and photos. In this section, let's talk about how you actually fly the drone using the joysticks on your controller. And so this is going to be very similar to what I showed you earlier with the manual controls in your phone. However, let me go through this all again with the controller so you get the best shots when you're out flying. Now, if you're in a location like me, there's some grass and dirt, you're gonna wanna hand launch. You don't wanna necessarily launch this drone from the dirt because the propellers are so close to the ground. And get the drone over here. We're gonna switch over to autofocus. We're in 4K 60 and we're ready to start flying. So, the first time you go out and fly, you want to find a big open space like this. I'm in a big open field here. And really, you want to just learn these controls, like really practice. Play with a bunch of different drone moves and just like get a feel for how this drone flies in the sky. So the left joystick is going to be like a single point on the earth. So you press up on the left joystick, the drone's going to go up into the sky. You press down on that left joystick, the drone's going to fall towards the ground. You pull left on that left joystick, you're gonna spin in a left-hand circle. You pull right on that joystick, the drone's gonna spin in a right-hand circle. Let's go over to the right joystick. So if I press forward on that right joystick, the drone's gonna come towards us. And if I pull back, and if I pull down on that right joystick, the drone's gonna go away. See ya. Now, if I pull right on that right joystick, the drone's gonna slide to the right while keeping the camera forward. And if I pull left on that right joystick, the drone's gonna slide to the left while keeping the camera forward. So let's go through a couple of drone moves that you might wanna use when you're out flying. So I'm gonna get a little bit lower to the ground and I just wanna skim the ground. Now, you want to be cautious if you're doing this over water, but we're just on a dirt field here. So I'm going to push forward on that right joystick, and you're going to get this really cool shot where the drone is just skimming along the ground, and you're seeing a lot of motion in the shot. A lot of times when it comes to creating interesting drone moves, it's the drone in relation to the landscape and the subject that's going to create some interesting looks. If I was to do that same shot way up in the sky, so I'm going to fly way high, and now I'm going to push forward on that right joystick, you're not going to see a ton of motion in the frame. Like, you'll see a little bit of motion, like it's creeping, but you're not seeing a ton of motion. Whereas when you come down to the earth and get closer to the ground, and now I push forward, you're going to see a ton of motion in the shot, and it just looks a lot more dynamic. So you're going to play with your relation to different objects. And one of the things that's going to help you get more cinematic looking footage is just going to be how you move the drone in relation to different things. So being close to an object and flying past it, creating layers and depth. And we'll go into more of this at the end of this video. I'll talk about different ways to get cinematic looking footage, but keep in mind your proximity to objects and how you move the drone in relation to those objects creates a lot of movement. And it's something that you're going to want to play with. If I wanted to create an orbit, say I'm going to pull left on that right joystick and right on the left joystick, and I'm going to circle around us in an orbit. And you can see there's a ton of motion because I'm close to the ground. And I'm going to stop right by this fence so we don't hit it. Now, another fun move is get right over your subject, pull down on the gimbal so that you're going to use the jog wheel on the left-hand side, find us, and I'm going to pull up on that left joystick while also twisting right or left. And I'm going to create a spiral motion as we ascend into the sky. These top-down shots look so good because they're unique to drones and you can't get them with other cameras. So let's say I want to get a shot with the sun peeking through. You can see I have my zebras on. It's very overexposed. I'm going to make sure I'm in D-log, okay, and we're going to turn off this overexposure warning, because you'll see in the footage you actually get more range than what the camera is showing here. This is like the burnt in look. You're getting lots of overexposure, but when you're shooting in D-Log M, you're actually getting more of that information in the sky than you think. So I'm going to get a little bit lower to the ground. I'm going to point the gimbal up, and now I'm just going to fly forward, pulling right up on the right joystick. And you see I'm creating this really cool shot with the sun. That's not something you typically think you'd get with a drone. So use your drone in different ways to create some different looks, because you basically have a floating camera that's stabilized, so you could create some really cool shots. And so when you're done, you could either pull down on the left joystick and the drone will descend towards the ground, and then if you hold this while it's close to the ground, it will fully land. Now I'm going to find an area that's not too dirty to show you how to take off manually. We'll do it over there. So you could use the controls on the screen, you could use the hand launch, or you could pull both joysticks inward. It's going to start the motors, and then press up on the left joystick, and the drone will ascend into the sky, and you have full manual control. So 3 ways to take off, 3 ways to land. And if you want to bring it home and land it with a complete automation, you could use the button for the return to home. So let's try that. So I'm going to bring the drone away from us, and I'm going to press and hold the return to home button.
Return to home.
And you can see that an automation comes on screen. It shows the AR of where the path is. It's going to fly back towards us, and then it's just going to land where it took off from. And you don't have to do anything. You can just let the drone go through this whole sequence.
Landing.
It's going to point down. It's going to show you where it's going to land. So I'm going right in that dirt, which you shouldn't be landing in dirt, but for this demonstration, I'm doing it. And it's just going to land on its own. And it's actually not too dusty over there, so it's not too bad. But that's an easy way to bring it back and land it if you're just kind of done flying and you're like, all right, bring it back, and the drone will come back to you and land. All right, let's go over the different photo and video modes that you have access to. And so we're gonna take the drone off and we'll just take some photos and videos, and I'll show you how all these modes work. All right, so just in the normal photo mode, take a photo. You could access JPEG, JPEG plus RAW, or you could just do just RAW. And when you're taking your photos, you could do 12 megapixels or 48 megapixels if you need more of that data. And when you're in photo mode, you just click the white button on the screen, or you use the button in the upper right-hand corner to take your photo. Now, when we open this up, you'll see we have these different options. AEB is going to give you the option to take 3, 5, or 7 different photos, and it's going to change your exposure. It's going to take a photo at 1 exposure and then take 1 brighter and 1 darker, or 2 brighter and 2 darker. So I have it set to 3, and we're going to take 3 photos. And it took 3 photos with that same shot, but giving you those different exposures. Now also you have burst. So you could do a 7-shot burst. So if you're trying to capture action, well, this might be a good way to do it. So I'm just gonna fly, and I'm gonna hit the button. It's just taking a quick shot, and you'll see over 7 photos, you're getting a sequence. So if you're trying to capture something in motion, it's a good idea to use that burst mode. Now underneath that you have time shot. So you could set it to 7, 10, 15, 20, 30, up to 60 seconds down to 2 seconds. So let's set it to 5. 3, 2, 1. And there you go, I caught my jump shot. So basically, whatever timer you set, it's gonna continually take photos in that time. So every 5 seconds until you stop the timer. And basically that's all the modes here in the single photo mode. So the other option for photography is a panoramic mode. So this allows you to take a panoramic of a scene. So let's go fly over here. I have this vista overlooking this neighborhood with the ocean in the distance. And I'm gonna change my panoramic mode. So you have sphere, 180, wide angle, or vertical. Let's do a wide angle. So it's gonna take 9 shots and stitch it all together. And basically it will stitch all those photos together so that you have this big panoramic shot. And it'll also give you the 9 different photos if you want to stitch them together yourself. Now you could select in the format down here in the lower right hand corner if you want the original photos to be JPEG or RAW, but the output of the stitch together is always going to be a JPEG. And so that's it for photo options. Now let's dig into the video options that you have on this drone. So if we go back to video, you have normal or slow motions. And normal you have 24 up to 60 frames per second, and slow motion you have up to 100 frames per second. So let's shoot a quick slow motion shot. And you can see when you're in the slow motion mode, it automatically makes you the slow motion file, so you don't have to slow it down in your editing software. Now there's this cool feature called master shots, and basically the drone will come up with a series of shots and stitch them together to create a little sequence for you. So I'm almost out of battery on this drone. Let's do a master shot and wrap this up. So as it's going through and doing this, it's giving you just a series of shots that then it's gonna cut together to create a little sequence. And I have a low battery, and we'll see if it finishes with the low battery. I still have 18%, we're good. It's got 2 minutes until it's a forced landing, so we got plenty of time. And you can even see on the screen, it's telling you what type of shot it's doing. So right now it's doing a droney, and it flew pretty far away. Now it's gonna circle from a distance far away. Minute 36 until a forced landing, but it's gonna pitch up and fly forward. Find me right here. On the right-hand side, you'll see that it shows the percentage of how much has been created of this master shot. So I'm at 75% with a minute left until forced landing. It's gonna do a camera down circle. Can it make it? We will see. The issue is it's super windy right now, so it's fighting that wind, which is causing the battery to deplete faster. 40 seconds, 88%, we're almost there. 91%, 92, camera straight descend. The grand finale, it's gonna come straight down on us, and then it returns back to the spot that it started, and we'll land the drone. And when the drone finishes, it gives you a video file with all of these shots stitched together so that you can go through and cut them and use them for your videos. And you have a wide range of shots that look really good, and it's all completely automated. All right, let's go through tracking with the DJI FLIP, because the tracking features on the controller are a little bit more robust than what you find with just the tracking in the follow or direction track when it's taking off from your hand or using the phone. So let's take the drone off. Now, something to note, when you're using the focus track option, you can only shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second, but you can do 1080 up to 60. So I'm gonna shoot in 4K 30, and to start your focus track, there's 2 ways to do it. The first is you want to draw a box around your subject. So you just pull on the screen, draw a green box, and it's going to grab your object. Now, these different options pop up, and C1, which is on the back, you can click this, and it's just going to go right into the active track and start following you. So now, as I walk around, it's gonna be that same follow mode, except for you're doing it through the focus track. And what's pretty cool with this follow mode is you have more manual controls. So this is just your standard tracking, but let's say I wanted to offset myself. So I could pull the left joystick to the left and I could put myself in the right third and it's still gonna track. Or I could pull down on the gimbal and I could change where the horizon is and it's still gonna track. I could pull the drone away from myself, go higher, pull the gimbal up, and the drone will continue to track and it'll stay locked on in that spot. So you have a lot more creative freedom with the focus track follow mode to be able to frame up your shot and have different compositions and really be able to create some cool looks when you're in this follow mode versus when you're just in the follow mode using your phone or the hand launch. You're pretty limited with what you can do. And the other cool thing is while you're tracking, you could be moving your controls and it actually in real time moves around the screen. So let's go back. I have myself selected here. And so the other way to start the active track instead of pressing C1 is just tap on active track and then it will start tracking. At any point you want to stop the track, you hit stop. Now your subject is going to stay locked on until you hit the little green X above the subject, and then all your focus track options will go away. So let's grab us again, but let's do this the second way now. So what I'm gonna do is on the screen, I'm gonna tap the little focus track icon right here, and it says focus track enabled, and now you'll see a little plus icon show up for me because it's finding me as a subject. So that's the other way to do it if you don't wanna manually draw the box. All right, so when you go into your focus track, immediately it goes into spotlight mode. And basically, spotlight mode will keep the drone in a single point on the earth in a single height, distance away, until you move the physical controls. And so this could be basically a tripod in the sky. So as I'm walking around, I could put it in the spotlight mode and then I could do whatever I'm gonna do and it's gonna track me and it's just gonna keep me in the shot the whole time. And I have the same controls with the tracking that I do in the follow. So I could put myself off to one of the thirds and use the spotlight mode. I could go up with the drone, change where I'm at in the frame, put myself off to the other third, tilt the gimbal down and be in a completely different spot in the frame. So you have a lot of controls with Spotlight, but the cool thing about Spotlight is that you can create some really dynamic movements by manually controlling the drone, but because it's staying locked on to your subject, it's gonna create a really cool tracking shot. So let me show you what I mean by that. So we have us here in the shot. I'm gonna start recording. So I'm gonna pull right on the right joystick, and now the drone is gonna do an orbit around, and I don't have to do anything because it's keeping us centered, and all I'm doing is pulling right on the right joystick. Now I'm gonna pull left on the right joystick while pulling up on the left joystick, and it's gonna create more of this helix style shot that we saw earlier with the automations. But I'm doing it with two simple joystick movements versus having to control the gimbal by myself. And also I could put myself where I want in the frame so I have full complete control of the different compositions that I can do with the drone. So I could start pretty close to the ground and now pull up on that left joystick, and it creates a shot where it ascends into the sky and then keeps the gimbal pointing down at us. Or I could do the same. I could start with this top-down shot, pull down on the left joystick, drone's gonna fall towards the ground and then reveal where we're at. So a lot of cool options with the Spotlight mode, and I created a whole video that's 15 different moves with the Spotlight mode, and I'll include that down below in the description. Also, I have these different drone cards that allow you to keep these different drone move ideas in your pocket whenever you're out flying, and I have a whole bunch of them. It's like 50 drone cards. I'll put a link down below in the description. You can download them for free. It's a pretty cool way to be able to keep in mind a bunch of different drone ideas when you're out flying, and you just put them in your phone. And it's something that's super useful when you're trying to come up with ideas on how to shoot your videos. So the last automation mode you have in Focus Track is point of interest. So you could click this at any point, it pulls up these two arrows, you just pull which direction you want the drone to move, and your distance away from that center line is your speed. So it's just gonna create an arc around, and you have the same kind of controls. You can pull down on the gimbal, change your composition, you can change your distance away by pulling back on that right joystick. You could change your height by pulling up on the left joystick. So with all of these Focus Track modes, you have complete control, and you could change your framing. And the cool thing about point of interest is that it's gonna consistently do an orbit and it's not gonna stop. So when you're using this feature in the automation that when you take off from your hand or your phone, it does one loop and then stops. Whereas when you're in the point of interest in focus track, it's just gonna keep doing it. So if you're in a situation where you just wanna record a cool moving shot of whatever's going on, but you don't wanna have like a tracking, you just wanna have like it spiral around you, well, this is a great option to use because it's just gonna consistently be moving, and you can change the speed, have it creep along, go super slow, or you could have it go super fast, and you could create some really interesting shots that are moving, and you don't even have to really think about it. The drone's just gonna be flying in a consistent circle the whole time. At any point, hit stop, it stops the focus track automation, and that's it. Now, the only option that is unique to the phone or the hand takeoff is the direction track. Because when you're in the follow mode in the controller, it only follows from behind. Whereas the direction track on the phone or the hand launch is actually gonna sit in front of you, so you could get that walk and talk where it's walking in front of you. Just something to keep in mind. There are limitations depending on how you're flying this drone. But focus track is pretty cool, and you can do a lot of stuff with it when you're out flying. All right, in this section, let's go through how you get cinematic footage with the DJI FLIP. We're gonna use the FLIP with the controller. That's gonna be the easiest way to control your drone, because when you're in the phone or you're just taking off from your hand, you don't have as much control, so you can't control your image, be able to make it look a little bit more cinematic. So I'm gonna use ND filters on the drone because I wanna bring my shutter speed to double that of my frame rate. It's gonna give us some motion blur. And motion blur is basically the blur that happens between frames. So if I was to freeze this right now, you can see my hand has some blur to it because I'm shooting at double that of my frame rate, which is 1/60th because I'm shooting at 30 frames per second. This is just like the standard for Hollywood cinematic looking footage. And in movies, this is what you typically see. If you were to shoot at a higher shutter speed, that could be used for like high action scenes, or if you really want to freeze frames. Now, flying a drone, you don't really need to shoot with this cinematic motion blur, but it does give you a little bit of a different look. And so if you don't need to capture each frame and need them super sharp, then if you want more of this cinematic look, you add the motion blur, it will make your footage stand out compared to the footage that doesn't have it. So let's figure out which ND filter that we want to put on here and get all of our settings dialed in. So the first thing I want to do is set up my frame rate. So I'm going to go 4K, and let's shoot this at 24 frames per second. If you want to get that cinematic look, you might shoot at 24. A lot of times creators will say the look of 24 looks more cinematic, so we'll play around with that. However, you could go between 24 and 30. I personally use 30 for a lot of my work, but sometimes I do flip into 24 depending on what I'm working on. And then let's go over to, let's lock our white balance at 5600. And now let's go over to our exposure settings. So we're gonna do manual on both our ISO and our shutter. And we're gonna take our shutter down to 1/60th. And it's gonna be fully overexposed, and our ISO is gonna be lowest at 100. Now we're gonna throw on an ND filter. And it's probably gonna be a 64, that's what I have here. I have 16, 64, and 256. With the light where it's at in the sky, let's try a 64. And these ND filters just clip right in, and you'll hear it snap. All right, so now, when I'm looking at this, it's showing that it's plus 0.3. I'm looking at it and nothing looks too crazy overexposed. However, if we point this direction, the footage does look pretty good. If we look towards the sun, it's gonna be overexposed. So you just have to kind of keep in mind when you're flying manual, which way you're gonna wanna point. But this ND filter looks like good for the kind of shot that I'm gonna get, because how I wanna fly is not directly into the sun and not directly where the sun is pointed. I want to kind of have the sun off to the side. So this looks perfect. So let's get the drone in the sky. Now the key with cinematic footage is not being super jerky with the joysticks. So oftentimes I'll stick it into cine mode and I'll create smooth movements with the scene that I'm flying. Now having settings might make your footage look cinematic, but really it comes down to time of day and how you fly the drone. So right now the sun is getting lower in the sky. It's pretty far on the horizon. You see these big long shadows sweeping across the landscape. And when you pair that with manual settings, you can have lots of contrast in your scene. Contrast is a big thing that's gonna make your footage look different than shooting midday with just sun blasting everything in the distance. So oftentimes when you see really cinematic looking footage, it's morning, evening, right? Then the sun's coming up or right when the sun's going down. And I think that alone, beyond the settings, like no ND filters, shooting at whatever frame rate that you want, doesn't matter if you have your time of day correct and you're getting some really interesting shadows and you're using light in different ways to be able to paint the landscape. You got to think of the lighting that you see as a paintbrush, and you are a painter, so you're an artist. So you use lighting to create your work of art. And when you think of it in that way, you want to start finding different ways to creatively use the light and how it hits different objects and how it brushes across the landscape. And when you start seeing shadows and you see this contrast between light and dark, that's where you really see some good looking footage. Now you pair that with smooth drone flying and you'll get some great looking footage. So when you're flying to get footage that looks really good, what you want to do is slow, and you want to be very consistent, and you want to be direct with your movements. So you don't want to be like flying all willy-nilly all over the place, but rather if you want to have a shot of, say, this mountain over here, maybe it's just a shot going straight forward towards the mountain, or maybe it's a straight shot going backwards. Or if you want to create an orbit, maybe an arc around. Another thing I really like to do is reveals. So I'll go down low behind an object and then come up over that object and reveal the landscape in the distance. And I like to use these reveals and use layers. A big thing for me to get good looking footage is taking advantage of creating multiple layers. So if you have mountains, if you have different hills or different buildings in the way, if you can create separation and have the light hitting these different layers in the distance between what's foregrounded and what's way out in the distance, you can get some really good footage. And then one other thing you can do that's gonna make it even smoother is shoot at 50 or 60 frames per second and then slow it down. So if it's a 24p timeline, shoot at 50, slow it down half speed. If you're doing a 30 frames per second timeline, do it 60 frames and do it half speed, and you'll get even smoother footage when you're out flying. Those are some tips on how to get cinematic looking footage when you're out flying. And yeah, pretty sunset. It's awesome. So, cool little drone. Get some really good footage with this, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. Now, towards the beginning of this video, I talked about how I'm gonna give you some different directions on what to watch next, depending on what you're gonna be using the DJI FLIP for. So if you're someone that really wants to dive into cinematography with a drone, I have a drone filmmaker's beginner guide. I also have a video about drone moves that's gonna really be helpful to set you up to create some interesting shots using the DJI FLIP. Now, if you're someone who's going to be using this for more adventure videos and you want to create more adventure style vlogs and you want to create content here on YouTube, well, I have a whole playlist dedicated to adventure filmmaking, adventure vlogging, outdoor travel vlogging, whatever you want to call it. But that's the kind of genre that I like to create content in. And so I have a whole section on creating outdoor and adventure style videos for a YouTube audience. And so you'll find links down below in the description to all of these different playlists and all these videos that's really gonna help you take you to the next level and give you some different ways to use this DJI FLIP when you're out creating your content. Be able to use it in a way that it becomes a storytelling tool. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the like button. It really lets me know if you like these videos and you wanna keep seeing more guides on different pieces of gear that could be used to help you on your journey as a creator. And if you want to go behind the scenes with me as I work on an adventure documentary, then I highly suggest you check out this video right here. I take you along on the journey as I travel across the world to work on a documentary for a nonprofit, and you get to see behind the scenes, step by step, how we went through and made the film. I'll see you over there.